You almost skipped this. And that's exactly how most people miss the moment that changes everything. Because it doesn't arrive with noise. It doesn't force itself into your life. It shows up quietly, disguised as a feeling you can't fully explain. A shift in your energy, a subtle detachment, a sense that something in your life no longer fits the way it used to. You felt it, haven't you? That moment where you paused, not because something went wrong, but because something suddenly felt different. Conversations that once felt normal now feel empty. Goals that once excited you now feel meaningless. And the strangest part is, you can't fully explain why. But here's what you need to understand. This is not confusion. This is not you losing yourself. This is the exact moment most people are never prepared for, the beginning of a deep internal shift. Psychologists refer to this as a cognitive transition phase, where your brain begins to reorganize the way you see yourself and the world around you. Old patterns start breaking down, old identities begin to lose their grip. And for a brief moment, everything feels uncertain, almost like you're standing between two versions of yourself. But here's the part no one tells you. This moment is extremely rare. Most people feel it once and ignore it. They distract themselves. They go back to what's familiar, and slowly that feeling disappears, along with the version of themselves they were about to become. So now the real question is, why did this moment find you, and why are you still here? Because something in you didn't ignore it. Something in you paused. Something in you recognized that this wasn't random. And once you recognize it, you can't go back to who you were before. This is the threshold, the moment where your old identity begins to fade, and something stronger, clearer, and more aligned starts to take its place. You don't fully see it yet, but you feel it. And that feeling? That's the beginning of everything changing. Lately, something has felt off. Not in a dramatic way, not like everything is falling apart, but in a quiet, persistent way that's hard to explain to anyone else. You find yourself in the same places, around the same people, doing the same things. Yet it doesn't feel the same anymore. Conversations that once held your attention now feel surface level. You listen, you respond, but internally you're somewhere else, observing, detached. Almost like you've outgrown a version of reality that once made sense to you. And what makes this even more confusing is that nothing on the outside may have changed that much, but something inside you clearly has. This is the stage where most people start questioning themselves. They think maybe they're becoming distant, or difficult, or even ungrateful. But that's not what's happening here. What you're experiencing is something much deeper. Something psychologists often describe as identity shedding, the process where your internal standards, values, and sense of self begin to evolve beyond the environment you're currently in. And when that happens, your mind naturally starts to reject what no longer aligns with who you are becoming. This is why your tolerance has shifted. Things you once overlooked now stand out immediately. Behaviors you once accepted now feel draining. And people who once influenced your decisions no longer have the same impact on your direction. But here's the part that makes this phase uncomfortable. Your external world doesn't instantly adjust to match your internal growth. So you end up in this in-between space where you no longer fully belong to your past, but you haven't completely stepped into your future either. And this space can feel isolating if you don't understand it, because it creates a quiet pressure to go back, to reconnect with what's familiar, even if it no longer fits, just to feel a sense of stability again. But every time you try, something inside you resists. Something feels forced. That's because your mind has already moved forward, even if your environment hasn't caught up yet. And this is where most people make a decision without realizing it. They either trust the discomfort and allow it to guide them forward, or they retreat back into old patterns just to escape the uncertainty. So ask yourself honestly, are you feeling disconnected because something is wrong with you, or because you're no longer aligned with what once defined you? Because if it's the second one, then this isn't a loss, it's a transition. And transitions are never meant to feel comfortable, they're meant to move you. The fact that you're noticing this shift means you're already further along than you think. You're not losing connection with your life. You're gaining clarity about what no longer belongs in it. If you're being honest, things didn't just feel different lately. They felt heavier, more pressure, more delays, more moments where you questioned why everything seemed to be getting harder right when you were trying to move forward. And that's the part that confuses most people, because logically, growth should feel like progress. It should feel like things are opening up, not closing in. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if the increase in pressure you've been experiencing isn't a sign that you're off track, but proof that something in you is being prepared for a higher level of responsibility? Research in behavioral psychology points to a pattern often called stress amplification, where before a major internal shift, individuals go through a phase where challenges intensify, not to stop them, but to force adaptation. In other words, the version of you that existed before wouldn't be able to handle what's ahead. So life doesn't just upgrade your circumstances, it upgrades you first. And that upgrade doesn't happen in comfort. It happens through friction. Think about it carefully. Every delay you faced tested your patience. Every rejection forced you to detach from outcomes you couldn't control. Every confusing situation pushed you to think deeper instead of reacting quickly. None of that was random. It was all shaping how you respond under pressure. But here's the part most people never stop to realize. The struggle wasn't designed to break you. It was designed to reveal you, to expose where you still relied on old habits, where your mindset needed to shift, where your emotional reactions were still controlling your decisions. Because you can't step into a stronger version of yourself while still operating from outdated patterns. Something had to be challenged, something had to be stretched. And yes, at times it felt unfair. It felt like you were putting in effort without seeing results. It felt like you were stuck while others moved ahead. But what you couldn't see in those moments was that your foundation was being rebuilt in a way that would last. Fast progress without internal strength doesn't hold. That's why this phase takes time. That's why it feels intense. Because it's not just about getting somewhere, it's about becoming someone who can stay there once you arrive. And now that you've gone through those experiences, something in you has already changed. You don't react the same way. You don't panic the same way. You don't depend on the same things you used to. That's not coincidence. That's evidence. Evidence that the pressure did what it was meant to do. So now the real question isn't, why was it so hard? The real question is, who are you now because of it? Because whatever is coming next will not meet the old version of you. It will meet this version, the one that was shaped in silence, strengthened in uncertainty, and built through everything you thought was holding you back. At some point, without any big announcement or dramatic event, something inside you started to change. It wasn't loud, and it didn't need validation from anyone around you, but you noticed it. The way you respond to things isn't the same anymore. Situations that once triggered you now feel easier to handle. You pause more, you observe more, and in many cases you simply walk away from things you used to tolerate without even thinking twice. That shift might seem small on the surface, but in reality, it's one of the most powerful transformations a person can go through. Because what's changing isn't just your behavior, it's your identity. And once your identity begins to shift, everything connected to it starts to realign. The way you think, the way you choose, the way you spend your time, the way you allow others to treat you. All of it begins to move in a different direction, often without you forcing it. This is what neuroscience refers to as self-concept updating, a process where your brain rewrites the internal story you hold about who you are. And that internal story is what drives everything. It determines what you believe you deserve, what you accept, what you reject, and how you show up in your own life. So when that story begins to change, your entire reality starts shifting with it. But here's where it becomes uncomfortable, because this level of growth doesn't just add new things into your life. It removes things. It strips away patterns, habits, and even connections that no longer align with the version of you that is forming. And that removal process can feel like loss if you don't understand what's actually happening. You might find yourself distancing from people you once spoke to every day. You might lose interest in environments that once felt familiar. You might even question why certain goals no longer excite you the way they used to. But this isn't confusion, it's clarity in progress. It's your mind recognizing that holding on to your past identity will limit your future one. And the deeper truth is this: not everything that was once right for you is meant to stay with you forever. Some things were only meant to match who you were at a certain stage. And now that you're evolving, those same things feel out of place. That's not a mistake, it's alignment. But here's the tension most people struggle with. Growth at this level requires separation before it creates expansion. There is always a phase where things feel like they're falling away before new things fully arrive. And during that phase, it's easy to doubt yourself. It's easy to wonder if you're making the wrong decisions, if you're being too distant, if you're changing in ways that others won't understand. But what you're really experiencing is the space between identities, the moment where your old self no longer fits and your new self is still forming. And that space is where the real transformation happens, because it forces you to rely on something deeper than external validation. It forces you to trust your internal direction even when no one else can see what you see. And that's where your strength begins to solidify. You stop needing constant reassurance. You stop explaining yourself to people who are not on the same path. You stop shrinking just to maintain comfort in relationships or environments that no longer reflect your growth. Instead, you begin to move with a quiet confidence, a kind of confidence that doesn't need to be loud or proven because it's rooted in clarity. And that clarity changes everything. It changes how you handle pressure. It changes how you make decisions. It changes how you view yourself. You no longer see yourself through the lens of past mistakes or limitations. You begin to see yourself as someone who is capable, aware, and in control of their direction. And once that shift happens, you can't go back. Even if you try to return to old patterns, they won't feel the same. They'll feel forced, outdated, misaligned, because your mind has already moved forward. And that's the point where everything begins to accelerate. Not externally at first, but internally. Your standards rise, your boundaries become clearer, your focus sharpens, and slowly your external world starts catching up with the internal shift that already took place. So the real question isn't whether you're changing, that's already happening. The real question is whether you're willing to fully step into this new identity without holding on to pieces of the old one just to stay comfortable. Because you can't become who you're meant to be while staying attached to who you used to be. At some point, you have to choose. Not loudly, not dramatically, but internally. You either hold on or you evolve. And the moment you choose to evolve completely, everything in your life begins to align with that decision. Something subtle has been happening in your mind lately, and if you've been paying attention, you've noticed it. The noise isn't as loud as it used to be. The constant overthinking, the second-guessing, the mental back and forth that once drained your energy, it's starting to fade. Not completely, but enough for you to recognize that something is different. Your thoughts feel more direct. Decisions that once took hours or even days are now made in moments. And instead of feeling overwhelmed by options, you're beginning to feel guided by something much more precise. At first, this shift can feel unfamiliar, almost unsettling, because you were so used to operating in a state of confusion that clarity feels like new territory. But this isn't something random happening to you, it's something your mind has been building toward. Neuroscience refers to this process as neural pruning, where the brain begins to eliminate unnecessary connections in order to function more efficiently. In simple terms, your mind is letting go of mental clutter so it can focus on what actually matters. Old thought patterns that once kept you stuck, doubt, fear-based assumptions, overanalysis, are slowly losing their strength. And in their place, a more focused, intentional way of thinking is forming. But here's the deeper part most people don't realize. Clarity isn't just about thinking better, it's about seeing differently. You begin to recognize patterns you once ignored. You start to understand people's intentions without needing long explanations. Situations that once confused you now feel obvious. And this awareness changes how you move through your life. You stop chasing things that don't align with you. You stop forcing connections that don't feel natural. You stop wasting energy trying to make sense of what was never meant for you in the first place. And while this clarity is powerful, it also comes with a certain level of discomfort. Because once you see clearly, you can't unsee. You can't go back to pretending something feels right when it doesn't. You can't ignore what your instincts are showing you. You can't convince yourself to stay in situations that no longer match your growth. And that's where the real shift happens. Because clarity demands action. It doesn't allow you to stay stuck in the same place while knowing better. It pushes you to move differently, choose differently, and prioritize differently. And at first, that can feel like pressure, but in reality, it's freedom. Freedom from confusion, freedom from indecision, freedom from the mental loops that once kept you in the same cycle. You begin to trust yourself more. Not because you suddenly have all the answers, but because you've learned how to listen to the direction forming within you. And that trust becomes your foundation. You no longer need constant validation from others to confirm what you already feel is right. You don't need to explain every decision you make. You move with a quiet certainty that doesn't need to be announced. It simply shows through your actions. And as this clarity continues to grow, you'll notice something even more powerful. Your focus becomes sharper. Distractions that once pulled you in every direction lose their hold. You become more selective with your time, your energy, and your attention. Not out of isolation, but out of awareness. Because you now understand that where you place your focus shapes the direction of your life. And you're no longer willing to invest it in things that don't support who you're becoming. So if things are starting to make sense in a way they never did before, if you're seeing through situations more clearly, if your decisions feel more natural and less forced, don't question it. This isn't you overthinking less, this is you understanding more. And once this level of clarity becomes your normal, everything in your life will begin to align around it. At first, everything you've been experiencing has been internal, your thoughts, your clarity, your decisions, your sense of direction. But there comes a point where this internal shift stops being invisible. It begins to show, not in an obvious or attention-seeking way, but in something much more powerful, your presence. The way you carry yourself starts to change. You speak with more intention. You react less impulsively. You no longer feel the need to fill silence, prove a point, or seek approval in every interaction. And people notice this, even if they can't explain it. There's a difference in your energy now, a groundedness, a calm confidence that doesn't need validation to exist. And that's where things start to shift externally. Because when you change at this level, it doesn't just affect you, it affects how others respond to you. Some people will start to respect you more, even if they don't say it directly. They'll sense that you're not easily influenced anymore, that your decisions come from a place of certainty rather than pressure. Others, however, may react differently. They may question you, distance themselves, or even try to pull you back into old patterns, not necessarily because they want to harm you, but because your growth disrupts what they were comfortable with. You represent change, and not everyone is ready to face that within themselves. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of personal transformation. People expect growth to be celebrated by everyone around them, but in reality, growth often creates contrast. It highlights differences, it exposes misalignment, and that can make others uncomfortable, especially if they only knew the version of you that was easier to predict, easier to influence, or easier to relate to. But here's the truth you need to hold on to. Not everyone is meant to understand this version of you, and they don't have to. Your growth is not something that requires approval to be valid. It's something that reflects alignment within you. As this silent upgrade continues, you'll also notice a shift in how you approach relationships. You no longer feel the need to over-explain yourself or justify your boundaries. You don't chase connections that feel one-sided. You don't hold on to interactions that drain you just to avoid discomfort. Instead, you move with intention. You give your energy where it's reciprocated. You create space where it's not. And this level of self-respect changes everything, because people begin to respond to how you carry yourself. When you stop settling, stop overextending, and stop compromising your standards just to maintain familiarity, your environment begins to adjust accordingly. Some connections will grow stronger because they align with who you're becoming. Others will naturally fade because they were tied to who you used to be. And while that shift can feel uncomfortable at times, it's necessary. Because you can't build a life that reflects your growth while holding on to dynamics that belong to your past. What's happening right now is not about becoming distant, it's about becoming aligned. It's about recognizing your value without needing constant reassurance. It's about standing in your truth without needing to defend it. And that creates a presence that people can feel without you having to say much at all. You'll start to notice that your words carry more weight, not because you're speaking louder, but because you're speaking with clarity. Your actions become more intentional, your decisions become more consistent, and slowly your life begins to reflect the internal shift that started all of this. So if people are starting to treat you differently, if interactions feel different, if you sense a change in how others respond to you, don't question it. This is the external reflection of the work you've been doing internally. This is what happens when you stop trying to fit into spaces that no longer match you and start standing fully in who you are becoming. What's happening to you right now isn't temporary, it's the beginning of a new baseline. The clarity, the strength, the detachment, the focus. It's all preparing you for what's about to enter your life next. Opportunities will start aligning with the version of you that exists now, not the one you used to be. Decisions will feel easier, and the path ahead will feel less forced and more natural. But here's the key. None of this works if you go back. You can't step into what's meant for you while holding on to what you've already outgrown. This is the moment where everything either accelerates or repeats. So trust what you feel, even if you can't fully explain it yet. Because soon you won't just feel the change, you'll see it reflected in your life. Follow for more, because the next phase of your life will require this version of you.